Hold up. You, with the little notebook. You've been standing on my firing line all morning like you own the place. So let's hear it, sweetheart. What's your call sign? Come on, everybody out here's got one. What do they call you? Spreadsheet? Clipboard 6? The line laughed because Gunnery Sergeant Tyler Brackett wanted it to laugh. 30 Marines on a hot range at 0840 hours, and not one of them risked a straight face when the chief range officer made a joke. The gravel behind the firing positions had been raked at dawn. The target berms marched out in clean steps to 1,000 yards. Heat shimmer was already climbing off the grass, and a salt wind came over the 2 ridgelines that hid the coast. The woman with the notebook did not look up. She was crouched behind a spotting scope at the 600-yard position. Gray softshell, faded ball cap, a contractor lanyard around her neck that read, "Range Data," in block letters. Her eye stayed on the glass, on the boil of the mirage. She read it the way other people read a clock, without effort, without thinking they were doing it at all. At the firing position, Lance Corporal Nate Furlong was coming apart in small pieces. 21 years old, 4 misses on his card. The chief range officer breathing down the back of his collar for the better part of 10 minutes. He settled in behind the rifle. His cheek found the stock. His finger crept onto the trigger. "Hold," the woman said. Low, pitched for him and nobody else. Wind switched. Favor left. 3/4 value. Furlong held. He came off the trigger, drifted his hold a hair into the wind, and broke the shot clean. Down the line, a spotter called it. Center mass, 600. Furlong let his breath out slow. He had not hit center mass all morning. Not once. He looked back over his shoulder at the woman with the notebook, and she was already reading the next gust, lips barely moving, counting something nobody had asked her to count. 100 meters out, the range flags hung dead. To anyone else on that line, the air was still. She had called a switch nobody else could feel because she wasn't reading the flags. She was reading the grass, and the heat off the berm, and the way the mirage stacked and tumbled in the bottom third of the glass. A flag tells you where the wind was a second ago. The grass tells you where it is now. She had stopped trusting flags a long time ago, in a country where trusting one could get a man killed. Brackett's jaw tightened. He had spent 10 minutes coaching that kid and put 4 holes in the dirt for his trouble. The contractor had spent 4 words, so he got louder. That was the move that had always worked for him. "I asked you a question. The whole line wants to know. You walk around with that scope like you've shot something bigger than a paper target. So go on. What's the call sign? Or did the agency forget to issue you one with the clipboard?" The woman straightened, slowly. She turned and met his eyes, flat, gray, patient as stone in a riverbed. And she said nothing at all. Then she bent back down to the glass. The silence sat wrong on the line. A non-answer was not supposed to land harder than a comeback. Brackett felt it land anyway, and he covered the feeling the way he covered everything, by getting bigger. He clapped Furlong on the helmet and announced to the world that maybe the kid would finally shoot like a Marine now that the babysitter had earned her paycheck for the morning. A few of them laughed again, fewer than the first time. On the tower, Master Gunnery Sergeant Desmond Toller stopped writing. He was 50 years old, and he had been on this range, in one billet or another, for the better part of half his life. He had watched the contractor call that wind switch before the flag showed it. He had watched her absorb a gunnery sergeant's best work in front of 30 Marines without so much as a blink. Neither of those was a contractor's habit. Contractors flinched. Contractors explained themselves. This one did neither. He set his pen flat on the rail and watched her range the 1,000-yard berm with her naked eye. Her lips moved. She was counting clicks no one had asked her for, counting them the way some men hum a song they don't remember learning. He had run this tower for 9 years. He had watched 1,000 shooters come through, and he could sort them in the first 10 minutes, The naturals, the grinders, the ones who'd quit when it got hard. He had no box for the woman with the clipboard. She did not shoot. She did not touch a weapon. She only watched and corrected and watched again, and every correction was right. There was a particular stillness to her that he had seen in exactly two kinds of people in his life: the dead, and the men and women who had spent so long not being seen that being still had become the same thing as breathing. Toller frowned and kept watching. By mid-morning, the qualification relay had found its rhythm, and the woman they were already calling Clipboard 6 kept leaking out of her own disguise, a little at a time, like water finding the low spots in a floor. She was supposed to log numbers. That was the whole cover, and the cover was thin as paper. A shooter 3 positions down was climbing his group, string after string walking up the target, the man cursing into the dirt between each one. She watched him through the scope for 2 strings. Then she spoke without standing. "That's not you," she said. "Your group's walking vertical. 3/4 minute a string, clean as a ladder. Check your rear ring screw. You're shooting a story, not a target." The Marine checked. The rear scope ring was finger loose, backed off maybe a 1/4 turn. He torqued it down with the multi-tool off his belt, sent a fresh string, and put 4 rounds into a cluster the size of a fist at 600 yards. He stared at the cluster like it had come to him in the mail, with somebody else's name on the box. Toller came down off the tower. He drifted toward her, the way a man drifts toward a card game he already means to win, slow and sideways, and he tested her, casual and lethal. 850, he said, like he was asking the time. Full value crosswind, left to right. What's your hold? She answered the Mirage, not him. 1.5 mils into the wind. Maybe a touch more. Your flags are lying to you. The real value's down low in the grass where the air actually moves. If your turret's capped instead of geared for mils, call it 11 minutes up. 4 left. A beat. But you knew that, Master Guns. You wanted to see if I did. And the come up if I'm shooting it uphill, she added, before he could decide whether to be impressed. You'll shave it. The gun thinks the target's farther than it is when you're looking down at it. Most people forget that and shoot over. They blame the wind. It was never the wind. Toller's face changed. He had asked the question to catch a fraud. He had caught a sniper, clean on the first round. She did not notice him notice. She was already reading the coastline 2 ridges over, ranging the tower, ranging the tree line at the edge of the impact area, ranging everything in the bay without being asked and without stopping. It was not a skill she switched on for an audience. It was the way she saw the world. She had not looked at open ground without measuring it in 15 years. Brackett felt the line's attention drift toward the contractor, and he hated the feeling more than he could have said. So he took the firing point himself. He announced a real shooter's demonstration, settled in behind a rifle at 800, and shot a group that was honestly good and not great. 4 in a tight knot, and 1 that opened it up. Then stood and milked the applause he had ordered into existence. He looked back at the contractor for a reaction. She gave him a small, flat nod, the kind a coach gives a student who has finally done the minimum and should not expect a parade for it. He turned away fast, but the nod sat under his skin all afternoon like a splinter he couldn't find. He was the best shooter on this range. Everyone said so. He had said so himself, often, loudly, and a woman in a contractor's coat had just graded him a passing student and gone back to her notebook. And the worst part, the part that itched, was that some quiet animal part of him suspected she was right, that she could have stood up, taken his rifle, and put all 5 into a hole, that she had chosen not to, the way you choose not to correct a child in front of company. A man can forgive almost anything before he forgives being measured and found ordinary. Furlong found her at the water cans afterward, grinning, unable to help himself. "Ma'am, where did you learn to call wind like that? I've never seen anybody read it that fast. The flags weren't even moving." "Around," she said. "Come on. The flags were dead, and you called a switch a full second before. Around, Furlong." But she said it gently, and she filled his canteen for him from the can while she said it, and the kid walked off looking like somebody had handed him something he'd carry a while. Toller caught her alone for half a second by the data shed. "You came up through a school like this one," he said. It was not a question. She looked at him for one long moment. Then she walked to the next position without a word, and her eyes went to the wind on the way. By the second relay, Brackett had decided the problem was not that the contractor was wrong. The problem was that she was interesting. So he made her a joke instead, because a joke was a thing he knew how to win. At the noon stand-down on the range deck, he held court. He christened her for the whole school. "Clipboard 6, he said, and ran a bit out of it, guessing her real job for the crowd. Substitute teacher. The DMV, a wine mom with a podcast about manifesting. The younger Marines laughed because he was the chief range officer, and laughing was cheaper than not. Furlong did not laugh. A corporal who'd watched her fix the ring screw didn't either. Then Brackett turned the joke into something with teeth in it. He rerouted the data collection so the contractor was sent down to the unknown distance lanes by herself, where she can't slow down real Marines, he said, loud enough to carry. It was meant as exile, a way to get her off his line and out of his sky. She took it without protest. She picked up her scope and her notebook and walked down to the stalking lanes alone, which is to say, the chief range officer had just banished a sniper to the exact patch of ground a sniper loves best in all the world. The unknown distance lanes ran 800 meters of broken grass and scrub and dead folds of ground, where candidates learned to stalk, to range without a number to lean on, to make themselves into a part of a hill. The school graded its own instructor problems out here, concealed positions a student was supposed to find, call, and report. She found them. All of them. She read a hide tucked into a fold of dead ground that 3 classes had walked straight past, and she marked it in the green notebook without breaking stride, the way a reader turns a page. She moved through the lanes the way water moves through a field, finding the low ground, the dead ground, the seams a body could disappear into. She did not walk like a person crossing a field. She walked like a person who had once needed a field, not to give her up, and the field had obliged, and she had never forgotten how to ask. At the 800-meter mark, she crouched, studied a stretch of scrub that had defeated 3 classes of candidates, and put her finger on the exact fold where the school's best instructor had built a hide to test them. She did not measure it. She recognized it, the way you recognize a face. Toller had trailed her at a distance, telling himself he was just checking the lanes. He watched her work the ground. He stopped telling himself anything. Back on the line, Brackett escalated the exile until it grew consequences. He told the armory not to issue the contractor so much as a cleaning rod or a spotting scope mount. He revoked her access to the data shed where the scorebooks lived. He started a sentence out loud in front of witnesses that began, "She's been interfering with training," and he made sure to start it where it would be remembered and written down later. She wrote things down, too. Times, names, what was said, word for word, and which line in the scorebook had moved since morning. A small green notebook, the cardboard kind, soft and furred at the corners from living in a cargo pocket. She sat with her back to the berm while she wrote, eyes up, watching every approach to her bench. She was not afraid of one single thing on that range. She was collecting it. There is a kind of patience that looks, from the outside, exactly like surrender. People who have never had to use it cannot tell the two apart. Brackett looked at the quiet woman writing in her little book and saw a beaten contractor learning her place The two older Marines on the line, the ones who had done a tour or three, looked at the same woman and felt something cold walk up the backs of their necks, and could not have told you why. They had seen patients like that before, in places where it had teeth. They just couldn't remember where. If watching a man with a clipboard try to erase someone who has forgotten more about this range than he will ever learn is making your jaw tighten, do something with it. Subscribe to Honor Tales. Stay on the line, because the wind has already switched and the gunny has not felt it on the back of his neck yet. Brackett passed her bench on his way to the tower and knocked her spotting scope off the edge of it with the side of his hand. "Sorry," he said, in the voice that means the opposite. She caught it one-handed, 6 inches off the gravel, without looking down. Pure reflex, the kind you cannot fake and cannot teach and cannot get from a clipboard. She set it back on the bench, square to the edge, and went on writing. The laugh died in his throat for half a second before he found it again and walked on. On the morning of the second day, Brackett stopped joking and started forging. He wrote up a range safety violation against the contractor. Civilian crossed the firing line during a hot relay, the form said, in his blocky hand. It described an event that had never happened, timed neat to a 15-minute window, when the range camera covered nothing but the parking apron and a stretch of empty road. He carried it down to 2 junior Marines and told them to initial it as witnesses. One signed fast, eyes down, wanting it gone. The other, a private first class, 19 years old, held the pen a half-second too long, and Brackett took the form back out of his hand before the kid could decide to be brave about it. Then the scorebook. He sat up in the tower with the master qualification book and a sharp pencil, and he made the numbers say what he needed them to say for the man coming that afternoon. Furlong's scores came down. 2 other strugglers came down with him. Marines Brackett wanted gone off his range and out of his pipeline, and 2 of his favorites went up, just enough, so that the pass rate the incoming officer in charge would read on page 1 came out clean and high and flattering to the man who'd built it. He was careful about it. He thought he was careful about it. He used the same pencil, kept the same slant to his numbers, changed nothing that a casual eye would catch. The trouble was that the woman he was hiding it from did not have a casual eye. She had the other kind. The kind that had counted 43 rounds out of a magazine she never loaded. The kind that read a man's whole morning off the shape of his shoulders at 400 yards. From 30 feet away, glancing at the posted scores tacked to the board, the woman read the book like a signed confession. She knew which lines had been changed before she finished her coffee. The jumps were impossible. A shooter did not gain 40 points in a wind that had not existed at that hour, and she had been standing in that hour on that line, reading that wind herself with her own eye. Numbers could be moved on paper. They could not be moved in the air where she lived. They flagged her contractor badge a little after 8. A corporal told her, embarrassed and not meeting her eye, that she'd have to wait in the data shed pending a credential review. She thanked him by name. She did not argue, did not reach for a phone, did not pull a rank she was not officially wearing on the gray softshell. She walked into the shed, sat down on a folding chair, and kept writing in the green notebook as if the screen door were the most natural office in the world. Toller worked the other side of it. He pulled the previous week's scorebooks out of the file and laid them beside the new one, page against page, and he saw the pattern in 90 seconds, the careful, cowardly arithmetic of a man covering himself. Then he checked the camera log for the window in the safety violation, and he found it blank. Not missing. Blank, covered by a man who knew the camera angles because he had written the schedule that pointed them. Toller did not say a word out loud. He photographed the doctored book with his phone, 3 pages, steady, and put the phone away in his breast pocket and buttoned the flap. Furlong came to the shed window, lost as a boy at a bus station. "Ma'am, they said my score didn't make the cut. I shot a .280. I know I did. I counted it twice off my own card." "Keep your dope card, Furlong," she said through the screen, not looking up. "Don't show it to anybody. Don't argue with anybody. Numbers remember what people change. That's it? Just keep it? That's it. For now. You'll be glad you did." He went away holding the little laminated card like it was evidence, which it was, though he did not know it yet. It is a small thing, a dope card. A strip of laminated paper with a column of numbers, the come-ups, the holds, the cold bore offset, written in a shooter's own hand from his own rounds on his own rifle. It is the one record on a range that belongs to nobody but the man who shot it. Brackett could change the book in the tower. He could not change the card in Furlong's pocket. He had forgotten that the truth on a range does not live in the binder. It lives in the dirt, and in the people who were standing in it. Brackett slid the forged safety violation into the OIC turnover file. The thick binder the new officer in charge would open first, the one meant to introduce the school to its new boss in the best possible light. He squared the page against the others, tapped it flush, and closed the cover, well satisfied with the morning's work. In the data shed, behind the rusted screen, the woman watched him do it through the window, and for the first time in 2 days, something at the corner of her mouth moved, almost a smile. Not quite one. The look of a marksman watching a target settle into the exact center of the glass. Toller could not let it go. That was the trouble with a man who had spent 30 years training himself to notice things. He could not choose to stop noticing them. He found her at the end of the day standing in front of a brass plate, bolted to a low stone wall outside the data shed, the school's fallen sniper's plaque, a quiet column of names of graduates killed in action overseas. She was standing very still in front of it, hands loose at her sides. He noticed she had walked straight to the wall without searching for it. She had known exactly where it was before she ever came to this base. "Contractors don't memorize where we keep our dead," Toller said. She didn't turn around. He came up beside her and kept his voice low. Off the record. The way two old hands talk when nobody with bars or oak leaves on the collar is close enough to hear it. "The camera window's blank, the scorebook's cooked, and I can show you the page. And all morning yesterday you were calling mirage like you came out of the womb reading it. Contractors don't call mirage." He let the next 2 words sit by themselves. "Snipers do. So I'll ask it plain. Who are you?" She let the question hang there in the evening air. Out past the wall, the wind came down off the ridge and moved through the dry grass in a long gray wave, and her eyes tracked the wave without her permission, reading a value off grass she would never shoot across. Toller's memory was doing arithmetic of its own, fast and quiet. He had been a young instructor on this very range a long time ago. He remembered a student, a sergeant then, female, quiet, ferocious behind glass, the kind of shooter that came along maybe once in a class. He remembered, a few years after that, a story that came back from overseas. A ridgeline in a country full of dust. A hide held past, the point a body was supposed to be able to hold it. A shot nobody believed could be made anyway. And a name that had gotten itself attached to the whole impossible business and never let go. He did not say the name, not yet. He was not certain his voice would behave if he tried. "You should make a call," he said instead. "One call, ma'am. End it tonight. Quiet and walk it back. Brackett's a bully, but he's got 20 Marines who'll swear to whatever he hands them, and you've got a contractor's coat and a notebook. Let me handle him slow, the right way." "If I make a call," she said, "he learns nothing. And the next kid he buries in a scorebook learns nothing either." Her eyes were still out on the grass. "Let it run, Master Guns." Toller looked at her for a long moment. Then he understood it whole. She was letting Brackett build the case himself, brick by forged brick, because a case a man builds against his own self is the only kind that teaches the room standing around watching him do it. She wasn't a victim waiting to be rescued. She was a sniper, and she had a target in the glass, and she was waiting on the wind. "He's going to put it in front of the new OIC, Toller said, half to himself, working it out as he spoke. The violation, the cooked book. He's going to hand the whole lie straight to the incoming boss on the first morning, because he thinks the new boss won't know any better." He looked at her. The grass moved. Her eyes moved with it. "And you're going to let him hand it to you." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. He saw it on her then, plain as a flag in a full-value wind. Not anger. Not even satisfaction. Just the long, level patience of someone who had waited out worse than a gunnery sergeant, in worse places, for higher stakes than a scorebook. He stopped trying to protect Brackett. He started protecting the evidence instead. He thought about the 3 photographs riding in his breast pocket, and was glad, suddenly and completely, that he had taken them. There is a name the Master Guns will not say out loud yet. A call sign that came off a ridgeline attached to a shot nobody believed could land. If you want to hear it the way the gunny is about to hear it, subscribe and stay close. It is coming, and it is coming fast. He walked back toward the tower. At the corner of the shed, he looked back once at the woman standing in front of the column of names, and he said one word to himself, too quiet for anyone living to catch it. That night, in a spare room in the base lodging, she opened the case. It was a battered, hard case, scarred white at the corners, the kind that has ridden in the cold belly of more aircraft than its owner can count. Inside, gray foam cut to shape, a silver star, the silver gone dull with the years, a dope book swollen fat with old data, its pages cockled and stiff from rain that had dried 15 years ago in another country. A faded photograph of 2 Marines lying shoulder to shoulder in a scraped hide, grinning like fools through cracked camouflage paint, and 1 rifle case, brass, the rim of it marked in grease pencil with a date she had not let herself look at in a long, long time. She had not allowed herself to think about the ridge in months. Tonight, she let it come. She had been 30 years old. Staff Sergeant Ellison then, a scout sniper team leader with 1 spotter she trusted more than her own heartbeat. Corporal Linus Vetter, 24 years old, who talked too much and ranged like a machine, and called her wind better than she called it herself. They had crossed into the high ground at night to overwatch a reconnaissance team moving up a river valley. Call sign Drystone. 4 men in the open, with 11 kilometers still to walk. The hide had taken 4 hours to build. Scraped into a shale slope, garnished blade by patient blade, until the slope held a sniper team inside it, and still looked, from any distance at all, like nothing but a slope. From inside it, they owned 1,100 meters of valley floor. Then the storm came. A wall of dust the color of a deep bruise, rolling down the valley ahead of the weather, and behind the dust, an ambush that caught Drystone in the open and pinned all 4 men in a dry creek bed with nowhere left to go. Comms degraded to static. Relief was a joke nobody bothered to tell. Nothing was flying in that wall. There was a hide on a shale slope and a sniper in it, and a team about to die in the wash below it. That was the whole of the arithmetic. She held the hide for 31 hours. No relief. No sleep. The dust worked its way into the rifle, into her eyes, into the seams of her teeth and the creases of her hands. Vetter ran the radio until the radio quit on him, and then he ranged for her by eye, half delirious from heat and no water, and somewhere down in the long dark of hour 20, he keyed a dead net and laughed and said the thing that became the rest of her life. She stuck to the glass. Won't peel off. That's sticky, sticky 6. The name was not earned in glory. It was earned in misery, in a scraped hole in a hill, refusing to blink, refusing to come off the glass, while 4 men's lives leaked away below. She did the math 1,000 times in those 31 hours, and never once let the rifle move. Range to the wash, 840 meters. Wind a switching, lying, dust-thick mess that no flag could have caught, and no flag was there to try. She held it in her head, every gust, every lull, the way the valley funneled the air and threw it back, and she built a picture of moving wind the way other people build a memory of a face. When you cannot trust a single instrument, you become the instrument. That was the whole of it. That was the thing they could not teach, and she could not unlearn. When the dust thinned enough to see, she made the shots. Off her own dope and Vetter's last good wind call, through air that should have made every one of them impossible, she broke the ambush apart and bought Dristone the seconds the 4 of them needed to move. 4 men climbed up out of that creek bed and lived to grow old. Coming off the ridge in the gray of the second dawn, Vetter was hit. She carried him. She was strong, and the slope was long, and none of it mattered in the end. He did not make it to the bird. The Silver Star came months later in a small, bright room, 2 hands lowering a pale ribbon over her bowed head, while she stood at attention and thought about a hole in a hill. The call sign she had never asked for stayed with her like a scar that had decided to become a name. She had come back to run this school because Vetter never got the chance to. Because somewhere out there was a Lance Corporal Furlong who would either be taught right or be buried in a scorebook by a man like Brackett, and she had decided which one it would be. She closed the case. She set the grease-penciled brass on the windowsill, where the morning light would find it first. A clipboard did not frighten her. Neither did a gunnery sergeant. She turned to face the dark, and the dark belonged to her. The second morning came up hot and clear, and Brackett decided to finish it before the new boss ever arrived. The turnover walkthrough was on the schedule for that afternoon. He wanted the contractor gone from his range before the incoming officer in charge laid a single eye on her. Wanted the forged violation in the file to be the only version of the story that survived. So he staged it as enforcement, dressed it up in the language of rules. Flagged badge. Unauthorized civilian on a military range. Removal. The line was hot. Marines down in the prone, weapons up, rounds going downrange at 600 and 800 and 1,000. The steady flat crack of it rolling off the berms. Brackett walked the line to Furlong's position and pointed back across the gravel at the woman by the data shed. Lance Corporal, go get the contractor and walk her off my range. Furlong came up to a knee and looked at the firing line between himself and the shed, a line of Marines with hot rifles and live rounds chambered. Gunny, the line's hot. I'd have to cross behind the firing positions to get to her. That's a safety violation. I'm not doing that. That's an order, Lance Corporal. That's an unlawful order, Gunny. Furlong's voice shook and held at the same time, which is the bravest thing a voice can do. I'm not crossing a hot line to grab anybody. Code the line first or it doesn't happen. 2 days ago, Furlong would have done it. 2 days ago, he had been a kid with 4 misses on his card and a gunny in his ear, and he'd have crossed a minefield if Brackett told him to, just to make the shouting stop. But 2 days ago, a quiet woman had told him to hold, and Favor left, and his round had gone center mass. She had filled his canteen and told him to keep his dope card, and said numbers. Remember what people change. He did not know who she was. He knew she had told him the truth every single time, which was more than he could say for the man screaming at him now. So he stayed on his knee, and he said no, and the word came out steadier the second time. For a long second, Brackett could not make the world fit. A Lance Corporal, telling him no in front of the line. Then the anger took him the way it always took him, fast and total, and he did the thing himself. He stalked down the gravel to the shed, took the woman by the upper arm, and hauled her around toward the road. "You're done on my range. Walk, or be walked off it." She let him. That was the part he would replay for the rest of his life, in the small hours, for years. She let him take her arm. She could have folded his wrist into a shape that wrists are not built to make. The kind of thing she had done to larger and harder men than him in the dark of other countries. And the narrator could have told you exactly how, joint by joint. And she did not do it. Her eyes flicked once, up to the tower, to Toller. A count. Not a plea. Never a plea. Then she smiled at him. The first time in 2 days. Quiet. Almost kind. The smile you give a man who has just put his boot down on something in the grass that he cannot see, and you can. It unsettled Brackett more than a fight would have. A fight he would have understood. A fight was a thing with rules he knew. This was a woman letting him do something, and somehow shrinking him with every step she allowed. Something funny to you? "Okay, Gunny," she said, easy as weather. "Let's go see the colonel." He should have heard it. Later he would understand that she had not asked a question, had not begged, had not threatened. She had told him where they were going, the way you tell a man the time. She knew the colonel was coming. She had known it would be the colonel before Brackett knew anyone was coming at all. He was marching her exactly where she had decided, 2 days ago, to be marched. On the tower, Master Gunnery Sergeant Toller picked up the range phone and said 3 words into it. And at the gate end of the range, where the access road came in past the ammo point, vehicles. 3 of them, government plates, rolling to a stop in a small rising cloud of their own dust. The change of charge walk-through party, early by an hour. Brackett's hand was locked around the contractor's arm in front of a hot firing line as the doors of the lead vehicle swung open. He was still talking, still building his case in the air. She was already looking past him, past his shoulder, past the whole rotten morning, at the man stepping out of the lead car and settling his cover on his head. Colonel Aaron Shaw had commanded the Scout Sniper School for 2 years, and he had driven down to the range that afternoon to hand it to someone he respected more than almost any officer in the Marine Corps. He crossed the gravel with 2 staff officers and a sergeant major a pace behind him, and he was 3 strides onto the range deck when he saw it. A gunnery sergeant, with his fist clamped around the arm of the woman Shaw had come out there to install as the new officer in charge of his school. The range went quiet, the way a room goes quiet, when everyone in it senses, all at once, that something is about to break and cannot be unbroken. Toller came down off the tower fast, almost at a run, and snapped to. He had decided, somewhere in the long middle of the night, that if it came to it, he would be the one to say it. He looked at the woman, and he said it out loud. The word he had not let himself say at the wall. "Ma'am, Master Guns Toller. We crossed paths a long time ago, right here on this range, when you were a sergeant, and I had less gray in it." His voice did not shake now. It carried. "Sticky 6. The word went through the line like current down a wire. 2 older Marines on the firing line, men who had been in long enough to have heard the story passed, hand to hand, the way that story got passed, came up off their bellies and stood, weapons safe, eyes front. A staff sergeant near the tower took his cover off without quite knowing what his own hand was doing. Colonel Shaw stopped square in front of Brackett, and his voice came out formal and ice-clear and carrying. "Gunnery Sergeant, take your hand off Lieutenant Colonel Ellison." Brackett did not move. His brain had not caught up to his ears yet. "She is your incoming officer in charge," Shaw said. "I would ask whether the 2 of you had been introduced, but I believe I just watched you introduce yourselves." Brackett had a rifle slung across his front, and his free hand resting on it, the way a range chief's hand always rests on a weapon. Out of 30,000 repetitions, his fingers came open. The rifle dropped off his grip and hit the gravel with a flat, ugly clatter that every soul on that silent range heard and would remember. His face went through it in order, the way a man's face does when the floor leaves. Confusion first, the contractor, clipboard 6, the wine mom with the manifesting podcast, none of those words fitting the words he had just heard. Then disbelief, as Lieutenant Colonel arrived and refused, simply refused, to fit into the same world as the last 2 days. Then recognition, as all of it came back to him at once and stacked up. The wind she had called that he could not, the scope she had caught one-handed without looking, the green notebook that had never stopped moving, the doctored book, the forged violation he had slid into her own turnover file with his own hand, the order he had given on a hot line. Then horror, plain and total and final, as he understood that every single thing he had done across 2 days, he had done to the woman now standing free of his grip in the morning sun. And she, free now, rolled her shoulder once where his hand had been, easing it, and her eyes went, out of nothing but habit, down range to the 1,000-yard berm, reading the wind, reading it the way she would always read it, in any country, at any hour, for the rest of her life. For 2 days he had built a story in which he was the only real Marine on the range, and she was a joke he got to tell. Now the story turned itself inside out in front of 30 witnesses, and every laugh he had collected came due at once. Clipboard 6, stick to the clipboard, leave the shooting to people who've earned it. He had said that. To her. To a woman with a silver star in a hard case, and a name that 2 of his own Marines had just stood up at the sound of. The line came to attention without an order to do it. Furlong, still on his knee, rose and squared his shoulders. Toller let out a breath he might have been holding since the night before. "Range is cold," Shaw said. "Clear that weapon and recover it. Gunnery Sergeant Brackett, you are relieved as Chief Range Officer pending investigation. Sergeant Major, escort him off my line." Nobody picked the rifle up for a long second. It lay there in the gravel between Ellison and Brackett, muzzle down in the dirt. The one sin a range chief can never explain away lying right there at his own boots. Ellison looked at it. Then she looked at him. "Safety first, Gunny," she said, even and quiet. And she stepped over it. It came apart in a single morning, the way rotten things always do once the first board has been pulled up and the light gets under the rest. Toller handed Colonel Shaw the 3 photographs from his phone, the doctored scorebook, page against page against page, and beside them, the camera log with its blank, impossible window of time. Ellison produced the green notebook. 2 days of times, names, and exact quotes, written in a small, steady hand by a woman everyone had believed was being quietly humiliated when she had in fact been building a case the whole while. The forged safety violation was lifted out of the turnover file and laid down next to the empty camera window, and the 2 pieces of paper told the entire story between them without anyone needing to raise a voice. An investigating officer was appointed before noon. Brackett was relieved and taken into custody pending charges, making false official statements, the unlawful order on a hot range, and a pattern of hazing against Furlong and the shooters he had buried in the book to keep his own numbers shining. The private first class who had held the pen too long came forward on his own and recanted his initials before anyone asked him to. He was counseled, not crushed, because Ellison told the investigating officer that the kid had been 19 and afraid of his gunny, and that fear in a 19-year-old was a thing you fixed, not a thing you ended a man over. The 2 favorites whose scores Brackett had inflated were quietly pulled back to the line and refired and rescored, honest this time, by their own hands. The whole small, rotten kingdom came down by lunch. If you stayed on the line for this one, for the wind call, for the green notebook, for the rifle in the gravel, then do the thing that keeps these stories coming. Subscribe to Honor Tales. There is another name out there, and another morning. And we are only just getting started. She found Furlong at the water cans. She had her real uniform on now, the rank she had been wearing under the gray softshell the entire time. And the kid did not know whether to salute or apologize, and ended up doing a clumsy little of both. "Your score's restored," she told him. 281, actually. You miscounted by 1. Against yourself, not 4. You shot better than you thought you did. She let that land a second. And you refused an unlawful order on a hot range, out loud, in front of the man who could have ended your career for it. You have any idea how rare that is, Furlong? The line was hot, ma'am. I couldn't. That's all. That's the whole job. That's the entire job, start to finish. He chose the loudmouth. You chose the line. She looked at him a moment longer. I'm telling the colonel I want you tracked toward instructor duty. Don't lose what made you say no this morning. Most people lose it somewhere along the way, and they never even notice it's gone. He stood a little taller and did not trust himself to speak, and that was all right with both of them. Dusk came down slow. The range emptied out. The flags hung slack and then stirred, the way they always did in the cool of the evening when the land let go of the day's heat. And a woman in a Marine Corps uniform walked alone across the gravel to a brass plate, bolted to a low stone wall. She stopped 2 fingers below one name, Corporal Linus Vetter. She stood the way she had stood in the hide on the ridge, still, patient, reading a wind that wasn't there, that would never be there again. Her secure phone buzzed against her hip, a message from a call sign she had buried in 2011. Drystone, the recon team leader she had pulled out of a creek bed in a dust storm, reported killed 2 years after, mourned, filed away, grieved and let go of. 3 lines on the small screen. A coded greeting first. Still stuck to the glass, sticky. Then a photograph, grainy and dark. A freighter at a floodlit wharf, the water gone black around the hull. Container cranes standing over it like gallows. Then 1 line of text beneath it. Dock 14. Aiden, come read this wind for me. She looked at it for a long time. The light went out of the sky behind the 1,000-yard berm. Somewhere, a long way off, a gull complained about the dark. Aiden. A wharf. A wind she had not read yet, over water she had never crossed, for a man she had buried twice. Once in a creek bed, once in her own heart. Drystone was alive. The arithmetic of that was going to take her a while. She did not smile. She closed the screen, set her palm flat against the cold brass below Vetter's name for 1 second, the way you'd touch a shoulder, and turned. Then she started walking. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.